Welcome, this is Rich Fedvik, also known as Keep Hope Alive in the forums. Going to do another video here for you. This time I'm going to talk about wiring crossovers. Again, this is on the same subject of making connections. These are the same connectors that I just used and made to connect to a speaker, fully insulated with electrical tape, because while heat shrink is what I fully recommend, I know not everybody likes to use it or doesn't want to spend the extra money, because as you buy various tools, they do cost money. Of course, in everything I'm going to use my trusty automatic wire strippers from Radio Shack. This time I'm using a connector with a red end on it. So each of these colors essentially corresponds to a wire gauge. When you look on the package, you'll see that the red plastic is good for wires smaller than 16 gauge. The blue is good for wires 14 to 16 gauge. And if you run across the yellow is good for 12 and sometimes up to 10 gauge. Just the same as when we make any connection, the most important part about it is making sure that you can't see any bare copper wire. So after I strip it, I give it a quick twist. I'll insert the wire in and I'll see how much play I have. If it's a little loose, as I mentioned in the other video, I'll actually take this wire, fold it back on it, give it a pinch, and make sure that when I insert it, it's actually tight. Now this time, when you look in the end, you're going to want to make sure that you can actually see the tip of your wire. So that makes sure you got it almost all the way in there. And then you're going to make your crimp. Again, you can use ratcheting crimpers to make this crimp. Make sure it's nice and solid. I highly recommend them, but let's say you just didn't want to spend the extra money on those, because they do cost a little bit more. Then you can use the crimper that's in the base of your tool. Now there are other crimpers on the market, and I do enough wiring work. I've bought a couple over the years. This is a standard crimper, but it gives me a couple other different sizes that I can work with and a little bit more leverage. But we'll stick with our automatic wire stripper. Again, you're looking for the spot that has the colored dots on it. Those colored dots correspond to the various insulated terminals. Give it a nice tight squeeze, and you got a nice little terminal there. So what you always want to look for is make sure you don't see any bare wire coming out either end. Again, no bare wire coming out either end. You're welcome to wrap this with electrical tape if you want. If you don't have wire that's red and black, let's say you have wire that is clear, I recommend using a little piece of red electrical tape to identify polarity on it. You want something better than just having to look for the printed labels that are on there. Now we're sitting here with a crossover. What we're going to do is look on the crossover for the spot that says plus and minus. This crossover was made by NB Quart, and it's fairly, as my opinion, lower quality because it's the newer stuff. The labels are actually a little bit lower than you can see, but that's plus, that's minus. In car audio, black is minus and red is plus. So you simply insert those into your crossover, tighten them down. Now what you'll end up with is a fairly decent connection that is devoid of any bare wire strands. If you saw any wire touching between those, that's indicative of a short circuit. So that is my input. That's actually my output to my crossover. That's a tweeter output. That's a woofer output. This would go to a tweeter. These would go to a woofer. And this is my input. If you ever wonder if you come across a crossover that has these little spade connectors on it, that's essentially jumping the two of them. This is a bi-ampable crossover, meaning you could have separate amp channels for the woofers and separate amp channels for the tweeters. In this case, let's say you just had one amplifier, you wanted to run them both. So we're going to leave that bus in there, and again, we'll make this same connection 6 times or 8 times, however many wires you need to land. Every time you're going to use this. I know that you may have seen people, or know people that say it's okay to just jam wire in there and tighten it down. Don't recommend you doing that. That's not how professionals do it. If you see anybody that does that, I would pretty much advise you don't let them touch your car. Thank you. We'll see you again.